forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Thanks for listening to Big Man ASMR. The full moon shone brightly in the village, but barely pierced through the dense tree cover of the forest, one of the many reasons why few have ventured into this forest after dark. A few of the other reasons being tales of beasts, witchcraft, and one particularly notable story of a being so powerful it could rip trees and livestock in half with its bare hands, or claws in some accounts. While these tales frightened the villagers and kept them from venturing into these woods, the mighty Hercules was not impressed. He walked through the forest to his home, with small lantern in hand whenever he pleased, not fearing for his own safety, but fearing for the safety of anything or anyone that might get in his way. Hercules moved into a large cottage that he built on a farm that he also constructed with his bare hands to get away from the village and the villagers. He had grown both bored and annoyed with them all. He'd had relations with all the women, which was causing friction with the men, many of which he'd also had relations with. Everyone presumed the only reason he wasn't ganged up on and murdered in his sleep was that his immense strength and power was frightening and also an asset. He kept the villagers safe, but there was friction and hurt feelings nonetheless, and so Hercules decided it best to move out of town a little, where he wasn't as in demand to help satisfy anyone's hunger or asked to move large boulders on a whim. Hercules would go into town more sparingly now. He had quite the setup at his farm. He could lift trees and bench press cattle for reps to keep his gargantuan muscles pumped and powerful. But the camaraderie of working out at the gymnasium and drinking beer at the tavern was nice, and to fight an unruly out-of-towner just for sport was a favorite pastime. He'd realized it was no fun being that strong unless he could display that strength to others, and make quite a lot of money doing just that. The villagers found great joy in finding the strongest men from miles away, bringing them in for Hercules to compete with in various strength activities. He was a celebrity of sorts and also incredibly in demand to travel to other villages and towns to compete with their strong men. Only a few insiders know that he's made great wealth by pretending to lose to whatever flabby strongman type could acquire the capital necessary for Herc to put his pride aside and assist in bolstering the image of a particular village's hero. It's a moral boost for the villagers who can claim to have the strongest man, and a huge payday for Herc. Hercules continued his dark journey home, a small lantern providing just enough light to guide his way. His sweaty shirt was off and tucked sloppily into his belt. It would likely catch on a tree branch and be found in the coming days on a later trip into town. Perspiration dripped over his mountainous pecs, which bounced mightily with each heavy step. His arms bulged and rippled from the night's manly festivities. The sound of coins, the night's earnings, jangled in his heavy pockets. He'd had some beers this evening with the guys at the tavern and worked up a sweat arm-wrestling some beefy visitors. He never lost a match, unless paid to do so, and that was a price that most could not afford, even when he let multiple men try to take down his arm. And so the winnings piled up whenever he went out, as did the free beer from both the bar owner and the patrons, all trying to keep them there to entertain. The leaves rustled in the distance, the sound of heavy footsteps. His vision was hampered by the darkness and drunkenness. There was no telling how many drinks it took to get a man of his size drunk. Enough to kill a herd of cattle, one might assume. If the rustling sound was someone trying to take their money back, they'd better bring an army. Even then, maybe 2 or 3 armies might be necessary. He won fair and square. Some men resort to cheap tricks at bar games, but not Herc, just raw, manly power. "Who goes there?" Hercules bellowed. The sound continued. "Show yourself," he demanded. "I am not in the mood to bloody my hands this evening." Anger and testosterone were both pulsing through his veins. He swung his lantern in various directions, looking to see what this being was that was making such a racket. His lantern went dark. Hercules instinctively threw a punch. His sinewy arm snaked with veins and raw strength. Muscles bulged and tensed as his arm flew with unmatched power and force. But his arm stopped cold without landing a punch. He felt a pressure around his clenched fist. A hand, or maybe a claw, had halted his arm's powerful trajectory in mid-air. "Whoa," Hercules confusedly asked. Instead of maintaining its forward momentum, Hercules found his arm being pressed backwards. "This can't be possible," he murmured to himself as he exerted resistance against the immense pressure. He swung the other massive fist in the same direction. It was met with a... He was slightly aroused at the strength of this being. Was he that drunk? Or was this creature or force of nature just that strong? If only I could see, Hercules thought. I could easily gain the upper hand and take down this being with my powerful muscles. But Hercules could not see. His light had been extinguished and darkness had engulfed everything around him. Without notice, he felt his giant body being lifted off the ground with ease. He could feel massive hands, possibly even larger than his own, balance his bulging mass in mid-air. Herc, blindfolded, hands tied behind him, a restraining force so strong he couldn't budge an inch. Where was he? He thought to himself. It felt indoors, but the smell of mildew and rust and candles filled the air. He took a deep breath. He could also catch an underlying whiff of the gym. Sweat and steel? Workout equipment, perhaps? A woman's voice was heard nearby.
"You're a fine specimen, Hercules,"
A mysterious female voice whispered admirably. Cold, soft hands squeezed his muscles. He was used to being admired and worshipped and was no stranger to people wanting to feel his rock-hard biceps as he flexed. But this was different. He'd never been in a submissive position like this. He could feel the presence of the being from the forest. "Please let me test my strength against this one," the voice asked.
"Not yet,"
The mysterious lady said.
"He's not ready."
She said as she bared down and grabbed his meaty pecs.
"He'll be crushed like an ant if we don't bulk him up a little. A few more injections and he may be a worthy opponent. A few months and his muscles may even be as big and powerful as yours.
Hercules could not see anything, but he had to know what sort of human or beast or creature had bigger muscles than himself. He squirmed in vain to break free. His imagination went wild as the images raced through his head, until he felt a prick.
Very nice.
The woman murmured. He could feel testosterone rushing through. He began to feel heavier. His skin stretched as his already impossibly large muscles grew even larger. His pants stretched and exploded. He was growing bigger. His restraints popped. With his hulking arms now free, he instinctively rubbed his hands all over his new mass. Wow, he whispered, almost thanking his captors for his even larger frame. He could smell and hear the mysterious being or creature from the forest approaching. Its burly paws engulfed the back of his own mighty hands, but gently guided them down, placing them on what felt like a bar of sorts. "Lift this," the mysterious being asked, more of a demand, really. Hercules, known for his huge muscle mass, not his huge intellect, probably could have used his free hands to snap off the blindfold and attempt an escape, but he was enthralled by his new size and strength. He grabbed the bar and began lifting. The forest creature grunted in disappointment when Hercules failed to lift the weight. "What is this?" Hercules thought as he struggled to lift. "Is this something tied to the core of the earth that no one could possibly budge?" Herc had never met an unliftable weight until now.
Still not strong enough.
The woman said.
We'll have to try again later.
"I am strong enough," the forest being boasted, as it successfully lifted the bar that Hercules could not. Hercules then realized his hands were free and ripped off his blindfold. In the darkness, all he could make out was a wall of muscle. With that, all Herc remembers is a loud thud. "Ouch! Where am I?" Herc awoke in a daze in his own bed. He had one hell of a headache. He began to wonder if it were all some sort of drunken dream. Then he flexed his bicep. It grew the biggest he'd ever seen. His pecs, his calves, everything bulged with new energy and muscle mass. Who were these beings and why did they want him bigger and stronger? Wasn't he already the biggest and strongest? Or so he thought.